I think the Clippers kind of underperformed throughout the entire bubble, and they were kind of underperforming in the regular season as well. So I think the question is, if coronavirus hadn't happened, would they have kicked it up in the playoffs like everyone had assumed? And I still don't know if I believe that. And here's the primary reason. Like I said, they don't have someone who's a primary or even really a secondary ball handler outside of a Kawhi or Paul George or a Lou Will. Right? But Lou Will's a score-first kind of ball handler. They don't have a big. They don't have someone that can really match up with a Gobert, a Jokic, an AD. Sure, there's Zubac, and they had this season Marcus Morris. And, both of them were relatively effective. I actually didn't want to see Zubac go when he went, especially to the Clippers in the fashion that he did. But I just don't think that they have enough from last season's team, and I just don't think that they're going to address those problems with acquisitions to make it where they're.
I know they've been linked to Hassan Whiteside. I saw. Okay. I don't think. I think Montrezl Harrell does a good enough job. I don't think that's not what killed them this year. They lost to Denver in 7 games. I don't think it was because
Jokic
it was because Paul George played like garbage. That's why they lost. It wasn't because they gave up too many points to center. Jokic is the star player of the other. Of course he's going to do. But the real hero of that series, I believe, was Jamal Murray. He was the one going off for 40 points in certain games.
Definitely.
And that's against their supposedly elite perimeter defense. It's because Patrick Beverley missed some time, but also played like garbage. Paul George played like absolute garbage. And Kawhi actually played really well, but he shied away in some big moments.
I'm just saying.
There's plenty of... And they have a new coach now. If they think the talent's there, and I definitely think the talent's there, there's plenty of incentive for them to just run that back, that good group of talent back. And, I think it's definitely a bigger reason that they lost that Paul George was playing like orders of magnitude below what people would expect him to. He wasn't even playing like a starter.
Yeah. But okay,
and to say they gave up a solid amount of points to the opposing superstar center who's expected to put up that many points in losing efforts against the Clippers. I just feel like that can't be the reason that the Clippers didn't live up to their potential.
So let me defend Denver here for a second. You're talking about these underperforming wings on the Clippers side, right? When Denver had almost no traditional wings at the beginning of the bubble / the start of the playoffs, right? Gary Harris came back half fit in that series. Torrey Craig was out. Despite these underperforming wings being the center of focus, you've got to consider that team wasn't fully fit and fully defensively capable of handling the Clippers. We haven't even talked about Michael Porter and what he might become. Anyone that with that wingspan that size has defensive.
You give credit to the Nuggets. What I was addressing is that the reason the Clippers lost is because Paul George played bad, not because they don't have a center. So in terms of whether they're willing to trade Paul George, unless they think he sucks, or if they're going to be good enough, if that group of talent is going to be good enough. Well, it is if Paul George plays to his potential.
But Montrezl Harrell also got bullied by Kristaps Porzingis, right?
And they won that series.
Barely. They underperformed the entirety of the playoffs. The Dallas series wasn't a good look.
That can be attributed to the play of their best players, because they don't have a center.
Paul George and Kawhi didn't even match up with Luka most of that series. Towards the end, it was Marcus Morris matching up one-on-one.
When Luka hit the game-winning shot, it was Reggie Jackson defending it, and that's a knock on Kawhi.
Sure.
There's no need. That's a mistake by Kawhi and Paul George. But that doesn't. If they had a better center, they wouldn't have won it. That team, as currently constructed, is definitely good enough to win a championship.
Where's the leadership?
If you think I think a lot of it, if you think Paul George can play as well as people expect him to, regardless of whether they have a better center.
So where's the leadership coming from?
I mean, Kawhi.
But Kawhi doesn't lead. We saw it this year.
Example.
You can't have that epic of a collapse and still be considered a through and through leader. His San Antonio team, he got led the entire way by that OG core. He had Kyle Lowry, one of the most high IQ players in today's game.
Patrick Beverly is a locker room leader.
Patrick Beverly just talks about Cabo. He just makes jokes. He is a joke. He doesn't even play like a starter. He doesn't have the offensive panache to lead a team like that.
No, that locker room can definitely have an atmosphere of feeling of like hard work and do your job, and that could definitely work well enough to win a championship. I mean, they're talented enough.
Well, let's move on to Denver. We already brushed over kind of how we felt. I'm pretty strong on Denver. I know you're a little bit weaker, Michael, but I feel pretty good about them. I think Michael Porter, whether he's utilized as a development project or a trade chip in an asset, he's going to be great for Denver. I mean, the kid was incredible in the bubble with limited practice going into it, with limited team chemistry, and he really fit right in offensively. It's a question of whether he can really fit that KD defensive style mold of being a rim protector, especially when Jokic isn't that kind of player. He can kind of stay in front of people, but he's not a rim protector.
He's on the rise, and Michael Porter Jr. is on the rise. That's good for them.
For sure.
But I kind of feel like everything was going right for them in the playoffs. Like Murray was playing near his peak potential. Jokic was playing near his peak potential. And I feel like they kind of saw their calf against the Lakers. They defied what people thought they could do against the Clippers, but I think that says a lot about the Clippers playing poorly. In addition to, I can give them a lot of credit. They did what people couldn't expect them to do. But it would be a much bigger shock if they had gone on to also beat the Lakers. And I don't see.
But okay, what's Jamal Murray's ceiling? Because obviously we've talked about we never talked about this, but it's a fact that Jokic is a potential MVP candidate. Right now, it's a top 10 candidate. In the future, it could be top 5. But what about Murray's ceiling?
I think he might be better than Jokic. I wouldn't put Jokic near top 5, though, more like top 15.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think the way that 7-footer leads that offense? I mean, considering that Jamal Murray is a point guard, right? And this is no knock on his ability to play make and create for others, because he can definitely do that.
He's a good shooter,
but
too.
Fourth quarter, half-court game, right, barring transition, I want the ball in Jokic's hands 10 times out of 10 in that pick-and-roll situation. Sure, Jamal Murray can bring it up in transition. Like I said, he can bring it up the floor. But Jokic is that it's like Bam Adebayo for the Heat. I really want the ball in the big man's hands. Who guards him?